Hey there, everyone. Welcome to Module 4, which is the final module for this course, Technology for School Leaders. Today, I'm going to break with the convention that I've established over all of 3 weeks, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the tasks from last week. That's the reflection bit, and then preview what is happening this week as we move towards our final project. So, goal of the course again is to facilitate constructivist development of student knowledge around the role of technology within schools and the needed leadership qualities to see that tech is used as a tool to improve learning opportunities for students. And so this is a theme that is really coming through strongly now, and which is fantastic too, because many of your inquiry questions are related quite directly to student learning. How appropriate. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So Module 4, this module, we'll have a quick look at this before we dive back into the third module. The learning target this week is that you can have a conversation with a senior administrator or board member about how a tech reform could or would impact teaching and learning. And so hopefully you're seeing the connection, in particular with the SAMA piece from last week. So again, before we just jump in, one other point that I want to make is that I'm not 100% sure. I just want to make sure that you are, in fact, accessing the feedback that you're receiving for many of your tasks. And most of us are new to Schoology, so I want to just point this out. But when you log into Schoology, you're quite adept at going to materials and getting all of the resources. I just want to make sure that you're also confident and comfortable with accessing your grades. And so you click on the grades menu, and what you'll see, of course, is fairly self-explanatory. You have the task along with the score. The little blue window that sits over to the right-hand side, though, of your score can indicate that there is, in fact, more information there to be unpacked. And so this is an example of one task where I've clicked on the rubric that's been associated with the score that was received, and you'll actually see a little blue speech bubble. And if you hover on that speech bubble, I actually give you some feedback for that specific element of the rubric. Now, there are times where I've given specific feedback to one element of the rubric. More often than not, I've given an overall comment for the task. That shows up on the grades page. Specific information from the rubric, if it's an element of the rubric that there is a comment for, you'll see that little speech bubble. And so I just want to make sure that you're actually, you're aware that it's there, and hence explaining the assessment that you're receiving, and hopefully getting some information to take forward with you as you progress through the course. So that's Schoology. So discussion number 4 last week was ISTE for administrators. This was discussion number 4. And the task there was to review the ISTE standards for admin. Now this is a discussion that is, we yet to see a shot being fired. So I know that everybody, myself included, we're all on vacation. So I've opened that up for another whole week. And sort of rolled that into this week's module. So I talked a bit about it last week. You'll see that for the video on YouTube from last week, so I won't spend any more time on that. It's worth revisiting our personal inquiry. How are you connecting? My concerns last week were that I wanted to reinforce the fact that the personal inquiry is sort of the glue that binds this course together. The personal inquiry is about making meaning of the course content to your context so that you can move forward in your journey regarding leadership, or just in help improve the work that you're already doing. And in fact, that's a lot of what we're seeing in the personal inquiry question. So it's all about connecting, making that connection. It's about being focused on what it is that you want to learn, not what is being presented to you via this course. I want you to see this course as being a foundation upon which to build something meaningful and powerful, and therefore related to your context. So these are some of the inquiry questions that have emerged from your cohort, and so I thought I'd just share them with you. I know that hopefully you are following each other's blogs and maintaining that type of connection, which I know for many of you is in fact what you want your students to be doing. So I hope that you are taking this opportunity and diving in. So Barbara, she has her inquiry question is, how can I expand the use of tech further into the visual arts beyond reflection and reference use or finding for a larger audience of students to include more creating? How can I effectively integrate tech with my kinder immersion Chinese class in order to best support student learning? Julie is one of our pioneers for the immersion program this year. That's a fantastic question, fantastic area to research and develop in. Sean is looking at creating a classroom environment of self-actualization for kids and adults. Simon, music elementary. How do I incorporate tech into the elementary classroom more seamlessly? For Tony, it's how do I integrate tech into the peer curriculum that will enhance movement patterns and concept understandings without detracting too much from active movement time? This is about that balance piece and using tech powerfully. How do I achieve consistency with tech integration in SAS's one-to-one iPad program? That is Kelly. How can I encourage my students to lead their own investigation of devices and apps to allow them to achieve their fitness goals? This is about student agency and them owning their learning in PE with Jared. With so many things competing for students' attention all the time, how can we meaningfully use tech to inspire curiosity and a lifelong passion for learning in our students? And this is George's inquiry. For Kris, how do we use one-to-one laptop programs to impact middle school academic and personal outcomes? How can the program that we have be changed to maximize student benefits from the program in terms of academic outcomes, citizenship, agency? This is about using tech more powerfully. And this is Kris. And for Kevin, it's about how do we overall become more tech literate so we might enhance learning for all. This is taking probably the most leadership perspective type of question, which is an interesting one from Kevin. So I think that the reason I chose to review those before diving into this particular task from last week, which was SAMR, is because I think that SAMR actually is a useful place from which perhaps to begin when we're talking about the effectiveness, the balance, the role that technology plays in your classroom or in a school, and so that was, I think, a worthwhile task. So you're asked to describe a lesson that you've observed or taught that would be classified as redefinition. And if you've never witnessed this type of lesson, describe a modification lesson. And so this yielded some interesting work through the blogs this week, and looking through your posts. Julie observed that it's more about how to best use my resources, rather than how to use more tech or use tech in a better way. This is about resources and technology being seen not as that thing that you feel pressure. That's what I see a lot of is teachers feeling pressure to use more technology and using it better. And yes, of course, we all want to use our resources to the maximum potential. But remember that technology is really just a resource, and it serves the purpose of the broader curriculum aims that are going on inside your classroom. If the focus is on the tech, then the focus isn't on what arguably is more important, which are those curriculum goals. And so Julie has observed it's more about how to best use my resources. Julie also included in her blog post an infographic, which I thought was a useful one, because as she observed, this is about the SAMR model is perhaps best thought of as a taxonomy. And so this graphic here, I think, is an interesting one. I'm not going to spend too much time discussing it, because I think it'd be better and more powerful if you went and had a look at Julie's blog, and which hopefully you're following. Feedly is a great tool for doing that, and have a look at what she's included. Kris observed that the biggest misconception that is cleared up is that SAMR is a hierarchy. If I were to make an observation about many of the posts, and I again encourage you to read through each other's posts on this topic, is that I did see elements of SAMR being referred to almost as a hierarchy. Perhaps the actual prompt for this week encouraged that. You know, if you've taught a lesson that you think included elements of redefinition, but if you haven't and you've observed perhaps a modification, then go with that. The truth of the matter is that the SAMR model is really about, it is more of a taxonomy, and it's definitely more about the overall pedagogy that is being employed in the classroom. And what does that mean? It really means that you are using technology across all four of those elements, quite likely, quite possibly, quite realistically, at any given time, if you're using technology. Lessons don't fit neatly into redefinition. Elements of tasks might fit elements of redefinition, but there's also a lot of substitution going on. And so perhaps one of the more obvious examples would be the use of Google Docs. And if a Google Doc is used individually by a student, then you might say that's substitution. But if they're collaborating with another student or more than one student, you start to say, well, okay, this is not exactly a substitution. We're now getting away from the pen and paper comparison. It's becoming redefinition when we can start to look at the revision history, when we can start to make group tasks, give students more confidence that their work in a group task is going to be recognized and more valued. Because I know for myself, my own experience as a student has been group work has always been a bit of a challenge, because I've often felt, and I think teachers, we all probably share this, experience in that we're used to doing a lot of the work in group tasks. And of course that's a bit unfair as a student. A Google Doc, of course, can help a teacher to identify well exactly who has contributed what. And now with the playback feature, it's amazing. So there could be different elements of the SAMR model that you're witnessing right in front of you in any given lesson. It's about recognizing where the real value and recognizing and being able to name what the role of the technology. So moving to Barbara's observations around SAMR is that she has, to put it into context, her what she's been doing is her work with power standards in her art course. One of them has been focused on critical thinking and reflection. And she's been using Blogger and Teacher Dashboard and all of the rest of that. But they basically, her and her department really want to leverage technology to much greater advantage for their students. Her inquiry question is really about how do I get beyond just using technology for the purposes of reflection or for research and be more creative. Now, her blog post this week for the SAMR related task was that she also included this note about the addition of video critiques for self-reflection. This is peer-to-peer, student to student, because overall, and this is a great strategy that she's identified that I hope will take her work forward, because what she's observed in her post is that while they were doing all of these things, blogging and so on, the communication itself was rather weak. And that's likely, I'm supposing, because blogs used in isolation without any form of engagement going on around them, not shared, not subscribed to, not read by anybody. This is really substitution. This is, and so therefore you have to wonder, is this really our best use of this resource? Is that this, and in particular, is this our best use of this time? And so that's an interesting one. So yeah, overall an interesting task. The SAMR task. I think that it should be treated and put into context. I would encourage you really to get away from thinking of it as a hierarchy, but instead learn to recognize what role technology is playing during given moments of any particular learning event. Okay, so we're now going to move to this week's tasks, and we'll kick it off with blog post number 7. Now, this is really about gearing up for your final project. This is about revisiting your personal inquiry question, and in fact using this module's learning target as a lens. This module's learning target is, of course, around being able to have a conversation that takes place outside your classroom. This is with a senior administrator or a board member about an element of change that you would like to see implemented, and so that hence that's really what your personal inquiry is boiling down to, because you need to then identify one element of change that you believe is important and explain by referencing it to your context, your teaching context. And this week, you're expected to draw on any course materials as well as independent research to inform that work. And so when we're looking at the analysis element of the rubric for this task, that is certainly something that's going to be taken into strong consideration, is that independent research to inform. Now, this, of course, does lead into the final project. So we should really, our focus should be really on that at the moment. So blog post number 7, think of it as being in lieu of the final project. The final blog post, number 8, is around interview reactions. Now, I've selected a range of fairly interesting interviews, deliberately selected from our context in Asia and in the international education community. And I've posted a question. I'm happy for you to modify that question if you feel that, in particular, if you feel that it relates perhaps more usefully to your inquiry topic, because then that can feed into your final presentation or project. I'm happy for you to do that. Just make it clear that you're doing that in your blog post, and include a link to the interview in your post, of course, as well, because I'm assuming that there may well be a broader audience than just our own little pond. So those interviews are interesting ones. By the way, each of these are posted in the Flipboard magazine if you want to get to them from your mobile device and listen to them with some headphones away from your computer. That will, I think, for me, that's been useful. The first one is with Vic Estrada, and each of these podcast episodes all come from Education Vanguard through 21st Century Learning. Some of you will be familiar with the 21CL conference in Hong Kong. They also do Rethinking Literacy, Rethinking Numeracy conferences in Singapore. So these guys are in our backyard for sure. Vic Estrada explains the Horizon Report. Now, this is number 1, cab off the rank this week, the Horizon Report, because this is all about school change. This is all about what is going on in education at the moment and where are the biggest changes happening. It's really looking at forecasting change. It's quantitative as well as qualitative research. Many international schools in Asia participate in this research process, but it really does dive into different tech developments as well as trends that are currently shaping education. You might be more familiar with the flagship reports, the Horizon reports. These are the well-known ones. But there are other branches of it, and the international schools in Asia is one example of that. Vic Estrada is really the driving force behind that particular report. So I really encourage you to look at that. And the question for you to consider is, how do we invest in technology in a way that serves pedagogy, which is piggybacking right off of where we left with that SAMR task in particular. The second podcast is looking at gender and leadership, and this is something that hasn't really emerged as a strong one through your inquiry or through the course materials themselves in this course. So I wanted to make sure that we were visiting this, and Stacey Stevens, who's International School Beijing's, Dana Watts from Hong Kong International School. They have run a series of workshops and pre-conference events through 21CL and others. And so what I want you to think about is, how do you think that conferences such as WLEAD can help to increase the percentage of women in the types of leadership roles they discuss? Is there a more effective method to do this? And one of the observations they make is that often women are, when it comes to leadership, are often in positions that tend to be more elementary based or tend to be more curriculum based. And I'll leave it to you to interpret that and to agree or disagree. This is the position that they stake in the podcast, but they're looking at different strategies for promoting women in leadership, promoting women into leadership roles, through looking at things like creative assessment and different aspects of professional development. Some of the ideas picked up in this podcast, I think, are quite transferable to a variety of contexts, not exclusively women in leadership. I think they've got some great ideas to real leaders in terms of that. So we then come to the third and fourth. Now, the third one is Rob Newbury discussing the impact of pornography on students. This is really about addiction and the role that technology has played in feeding that addiction. A number of you have got, as part of your task, is looking at how to balance the role of technology. What is the appropriate place and time allocation and use of technology? And Rob brings a very interesting perspective to that. Again, I think there's some highly transferable concepts that are discussed in this podcast. And he actually references another TEDx talk, by the way, which I also included in the Flipboard magazine. So if you want to go down the wormhole on this one, the Flipboard magazine will give you not just the interview, but it will give you the offshoot from this podcast. He's talking about how do we best implement needed but controversial programs in our school, and so I hope to see a number of you engaging with that particular episode. The final one, John Burns. John has been director of learning innovation at Chicago until 2 years ago, and he is now working for ISS in a creativity and innovation related leadership role. His podcast is really about how do we scale up change, and he talks about the concept of deprivatization of practice at your school, and so I'll leave it for John to explain that. But the question for you this week is, what needs to be done at your school to deprivatize practice? Or how can you encourage change and innovation at your school? This is this week's learning target, and so I think that for that blog post that you need to create blog post number 8, which is your interview reactions, as well as blog post number 7, identifying one element of change through the lens of your personal inquiry. I think that the John Burns podcast could well serve you quite neatly in those. In that regard. So that's this week's task. There's really only one announcement, and that is that, and I think I've already made it, the discussion number 4, ISTE for admin, has been extended. And please note the new due date in the task description on Schoology. I'm going to be monitoring what's going on across the tasks. I've got holes in my gradebook all over the place, and I know that's because everyone's on vacation, and many of you have been really great about communicating what's going on for you. And I'm happy to be as flexible as need be. But I'm going to have a look at module 3 in particular, where there are probably more holes as far as work being submitted, and look at just extending those deadlines. I don't want to leave you with too little time to really focus on your presentation. July 28 is our hard deadline. So if you need any help, you need any clarification about any of the course materials or about what's expected in the course, please just feel free to reach out via my UNI email, preferably, or internally within Schoology. Have a great week, and I look forward to seeing what happens next.